Change the.
Yeah, and that should be like right here, right? So that
Well,
way-
if there's public speaking, otherwise you want to mute like all the way down, otherwise you'll hear you. But if, since there's virtual. yeah,
Okay.
fine, keep it.
Keep it up. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
It worked the other day, just like that.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, we are, this needs to be turned down. Yeah. We're about to begin our meeting. Before we start the meeting, a couple of quick public service announcements. For an emergency, please note the exits on either side of the chambers and proceed down the stairs. Bathrooms are located out the door to my left. Women's room is to the right. Men's room is to the left. We allow 30 minutes for public speaking. If you have not done so already, please sign up at the podium if you are in chambers. If you are joining us through Zoom, raise your hand and our clerk will add your name to the list of speakers. Please note the council does have rules of decorum for our meetings, including the public speaking portion of the meeting. We ask that respect is shown to all community members, whether they serve on the council, in the staff, or are here as a public member in chambers or on Zoom. We are all doing our best to promote the public good, even if our views are in opposition to each other. I'm now calling the special common council meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. on July 28th, 2022. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence.
United States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. May I please have roll call?
Alderman Alderman Frankel,
Here.
Alderman Scott Childress,
Here.
Alderman Worthington, Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Davis,
Excused.
Alderman Oliveri,
Here.
Alderman Shabbat,
He is on his way and will be here soon.
and Alderman Hirsch.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. We are now entering into the public speaking portion of the meeting. We have allotted 30 minutes for this purpose. Speakers will have 3 minutes. If there are remaining speakers after 30 minutes, I will call for a motion from the council to extend the period for another 30 minutes. Speakers, direct your comments to the chair, as council members cannot engage in debate during this time. Please state your name and address on the record before you address the council. For the audience in chambers and on Zoom, there shall be no distractions when a speaker is addressing the council. The Common Council has also received written comments for our consideration, and they could be found on the city's website under tonight's agenda. Can I have the first speaker in chambers, please? We don't have anybody signed up. Can we move to Zoom? Do we have any speakers?
Charles Sanchez,
The clerk will unmute you. And then if you want to just test it out, Charles.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So you have 3 minutes.
Charles Sanchez, address is 500 Washington Avenue, apartment 15I, Kingston, New York, 12401, Community Dutch Village. I just learned of this hearing today. I actually thought this was yesterday. I'm actually a new resident as of June 4th in the Dutch Village community. I'm a little disappointed that I wasn't aware of this. And if I am not aware or was not aware of this, I think that is likely for most of the tenants in the 59 properties that are subject to this legislation. Although the vote is going on today, I think it would have been beneficial for all involved and all interested parties that there was some more outreach, so tenants would have had the option of appearing and or speaking. The time that I've been here in Dutch Village, there have been quite a handful of issues. Things are being misrepresented. There's a number of elderly folks that do not only not leave the property, but are not engaged with others that have voiced the concerns with not only the rent hike issue, but a variety of issues that hopefully, if this goes forward, the standard of management and maintenance will be raised to a higher standard. Not only that, that there is some consistency in the communication and uniformity, and a relationship is established between property management across the 59 buildings with the city of Kingston. Because with that, there would be a relationship and a level of trust that any issues that arise can be effectively and quickly resolved. In addition to that, I think this is a very positive situation that this is occurring.
You have 30 seconds.
I appreciate the time to speak. I look forward to assisting all involved parties to make this a better experience for all, including owners, landlords, property managers, tenants, and various city agencies. Other than this act, I think there's a lot more that needs to occur in the housing market in Kingston. Coming from a background of real estate and mortgage finance, I look to be involved, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Are there anybody in chambers who hasn't signed up that would like to speak? Come up. To the microphone, to the podium. Just tell us your name and address, and I think you need to turn on the microphone just by pressing the button.
There we go. We got a green light. Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aisha Mills, and I bring you greetings from Newburgh, which is where I live. I'm in the town of Newburgh, not the city of Newburgh, and I also happen to be running to represent New York 18 in Congress right now. But at the core of it, affordable housing is an issue that has always been one that I have worked on over the years in my 20-year career in and around policy and politics coming out of the national level. So I think about this issue very much from the framework of how it affects people in our communities, but also what can we do from a congressional, federal policy level to actually amplify the work that happens here. So first of all, I just came down to Kingston or up to Kingston. I've been running around all day today, get my directions right, because I wanted to congratulate you all for actually declaring a state of emergency. It is not lost on us all around this district that it will be huge for Kingston to step up and say, look, we got to figure out something. We've got to declare an emergency here, and we've got to do what's right for rent control for tenants. It would be a big deal outside of New York City. It will be a precedent setter for our region. And so I applaud you all for even having this conversation. It's on my mind too, and why I wanted to show up here just to thank you for your work and to amplify and echo all of the comments that have already happened about why this is so important. Because one of the people that has been instrumental to, well, actually two people, instrumental to my work here, my policy work and outreach, is right now in a situation of possibly having to leave her apartment because she can't afford the rent. And we are having a real difficulty just trying to keep her engaged in the 2 jobs that she currently holds, because she's not sure what's going to happen with her and her 10-year-old, and if she's going to be able to stay in her home. And it is a big deal when our lawmakers think about the people. and try to figure out policy that doesn't displace. I sit on the Newburgh Strategic Economic Development Advisory Council, where we get to make some recommendations to our council around the disposition of city land and buildings, but right now we're focused on land. We think all the time about how do we have development without displacement so that we can increase the housing stock, but also make sure that the people who
30
get to live
seconds.
there actually are the folks who need affordable housing. So I just came to share with you that I want to make sure that I am a collaborative congressperson when I go to Congress to represent us, and that I will be working on ways to incentivize local municipalities to be able to increase housing stock with grants and other programs that don't just take the tax dollars away from the jurisdictions, but actually put in additional funding to incentivize jurisdictions to develop. We
Thank
can
you.
do that in
Your time is
Kingston,
up.
and I appreciate your time. Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you. Anybody else in chambers who would like to speak? If there's anybody else in Zoom who would like to speak, please raise your hand. We do have another speaker, so we're going to move back to Zoom.
Rich Lanzarone.
Hi, good evening, Common Council and Alderman at Large Schutt. So, a couple of things. You know, we've heard repeated complaints about really one particular housing provider. And, you know, I believe, unfairly and unnecessarily impacting all of the landlords who happen to fall into this definition. So I think I would ask you to consider that. The other thing, is that there are so few apartments that are actually that will come under this. That's really going to be counterproductive. It's going to be not really very effective at achieving what you want to achieve, because 90% of the apartments are not covered. So what happens, this is just dollars and cents. So the other 90% of the rental buildings will be actually more attractive, and their values will rise, and their rents will be a factor of their value. So rents are going to rise for 90% of the tenants in Kingston. And of the 10%, I think, you know, I've said this before, that there's no means test. And for my 6 tenants, none of them are rent burdened. So, you know, history has shown that rent control basically mainly helps wealthy white people who just happen to be living in those buildings. And the other thing, of course, is that, you know, I have this 900-page manual of all the rules and regulations. I don't know how I'm going to manage. I have 6 apartments. How am I going to deal with 900 pages of regulations? So it's like totally inappropriate tool. It's going to be ineffective. It's going to hurt 9 times more tenants than it helps, maybe more. And so, you know, there may be you may think this is a great victory, but you're
30
actually
seconds.
You're hurting more tenants than you're helping. And I think you need to give consideration to the fact that, you know, not all landlords are problematic. I am not a problematic landlord. I have a great relationship, and my rent increases have been very moderate: 0%, 1%, 2.5%, and in one case, 5%. And I'm being punished unfairly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Bravin Ranga.
Great. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Glad to be back here again to speak in favor of ETPA. My name is Bravin Ranga. I'm with For the Many, and we organize hundreds of tenants here in the city of Kingston. And every day we talk to folks who can't afford their rent and can't find a place to live. They tell us stories about some of their landlords that jack up their rent, not necessarily to offset costs, but to make more money by gentrifying their neighborhoods. And they tell us how they can't find anywhere to live they can afford. And the few options that are on the market or are available to rent are just unaffordable. And based off these conversations we've had and conversations you can have just walking down the street in Kingston, especially in working class communities, there's very clearly a housing emergency. And the Common Council must act now to make it official and declare this emergency. And it would benefit some of the folks who've been living in these communities for decades. The only people it wouldn't benefit are a few wealthy landlords. I just want to address some of the misconceptions about this legislation. There's absolutely no evidence that stabilizing rents in a few apartments will do anything to impact the prices of other apartments. All this is doing is providing some basic protections to those in ETPA eligible properties. And the idea that somehow means testing these protections is a sound strategy isn't the case, because every tenant in these units deserves these protections. And finally, this law doesn't aim to penalize landlords. It just gives tenants the option to live in these basic rent stabilized apartments. And the county rent guidelines board will be able to determine what those rents are. And so they have the options and the flexibility to change rents accordingly. Residents across the city and myself asked the Common Council to give some of these protections to Kingston renters by keeping rents down and ensuring that Kingston can remain a community where everyone can thrive. And right now you have the opportunity to make history. Kingston can be the first city north of Rockland County to opt into the ETPA, which would be huge for the housing justice movement in the state. Just a few months ago, you passed good cause eviction, and right now you're also considering a more progressive zoning code. Kingston
30
can
seconds.
serve as a model, not only in the Hudson Valley, but across the state as to what fighting the housing crisis can look like. And I urge you to pass the ETPA opt-in later this evening. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Terry, and I'm going to need your last name.
Hi, my name is Terry Caleo Gomez. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're all set.
Great. So I, like the first caller, am a resident at 500 Washington Avenue in Kingston. I just want to urge the council to pass this resolution. Let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm sure there are a lot of things in this resolution that are not perfect, but it's a first step. And I see it as a first step in holding landlords that don't have their tenants' best interests at heart, that are only concerned with the bottom line, that have leveled people like myself and others here at Dutch Village with rent increases of $400 and $500 a month. It's ridiculous. There's no reason for it. There's no capital improvements being made. It's just a money grab. So while there are imperfections, I'm sure, and unfortunately, maybe some landlords are wonderful. I'm sure they are. And I hope that they will not bear the burden of the ones that are not. But as I said, we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Please pass this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Okay, no more speakers. So I will close the public speaking portion of the meeting. You are now entering into the report of, before we begin, I just want to, for the record, note that Alderman Steve Shabbat is in attendance in chambers. We now enter into the report of committees, starting and ending with resolution number 144.
Resolution 144 of 2022. Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, declaring a housing emergency and regulation of rents pursuant to the Emergency Tenant Protection Act.
On the question? Alderman Carl Frankel, and then Alderwoman Rita Worthington. And I do see you online too. So
Thank you, Madam President. I will be voting for the ETPA, as they say, with bells on. I will be doing so despite the real estate lobby's ardent opposition, which I have found unpersuasive and to a certain extent disingenuous. I walked away from the public comments the other day with a clear sense that the debate pitted corporate interests against the people. I acknowledge that this is overly simplistic and perhaps a bit unfair, but that's how it landed for me. I would also note that multiple tenants from Dutch Village, which is in my ward, have approached me over the last months to convey their unhappiness and frustration with current management. Hopefully, the passage of the ETPA will start to address their concerns. At the end of the day, it's not about politics, it's about people, and that's why I'm voting in favor of this bill. I'd also like to give a big shout out to our housing director, Bartek Starodaj, with apologies for the probable mangling of his name, for his excellent work in getting us to the point where this legislation has become possible. Thank you, Madam President.
thank you. Alderwoman Rita Worthington.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to make reference to what one of the speakers said during the public hearing held this past Tuesday. Paraphrasing, it was said that we cannot impede progress while trying to obtain perfection. This recent vacancy study that was done by the City of Kingston's housing director, thank you very much, we all just confirmed what we already knew. We are living in a time where housing, in particular, affordable housing, is almost non-existent. There is a housing crisis in our city. This resolution that we are voting on tonight does not and will not solve the entirety of the crisis that we find ourselves in, but I do believe it is a step in the right direction. The most obvious benefit is declaring a housing emergency and opting into the Emergency Tenant Protection Act is that lower prices of rent-controlled apartments will make housing affordable to low and moderate income people, therefore preventing displacement. This is important because we are living in a time where wages often do not keep pace with rising rents. And while many have said this legislation is not perfect, let's understand the pursuit of perfection is noble, but unless we're willing to settle for good, we may have to settle for nothing at all. And that is something that I am not willing to do. And so that being said, I will be a yes on this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to the hands on Zoom, I will start with Alderman Rennie Scott Childress and then move to Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch. So Alderman Rennie Scott Childress, please. And Pete, can you turn the volume? Hi, Rennie.
Thank you, President Schott. I would like to say that.
Sorry, Rennie, hold on. I wasn't clear in my directions. Now you're good.
Okay. Thank you, President Schott. We wrestled a lot over a previous piece of legislation called good cause eviction. And I noted that that piece of legislation probably should be called reasonable cause legislation. And I believe that this is a very similar kind of act looking at the ETPA. We're doing something reasonable. We're trying to set some limits that will make it possible for people who have apartments to remain in those apartments in the ETPA eligible buildings. We're trying to make sure that people can have some sense of the future costs of their housing. We have to remember too that when we talk about apartments, these are not widgets that are sold in the open market. These are people's homes. And that puts a special burden on the people who provide housing. We have to powerfully consider that folks have a basic place to live so that they can do all the other things that make this a great community. Without good housing, nothing else in Kingston works. I believe that this legislation is reasonable. It sets up a process in which different members of the community will be involved in looking at the kind of rents that would be appropriate for our market, for our residents. And remember, these are our neighbors, our family, our friends, our coworkers. And so what we're really doing here is taking care of us, the members of the Kingston community. I will definitely be in favor of the ETPA adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to say thank you to everyone that came out and spoke at our public hearing this week, tonight, and sent in public comment, even for the last few years. Here in Ward 9, I've lost a lot of residents that were very active community members. A lot of elderly people are very fearful that have lived in their apartment for 30 years, and they should not have to be living out their last, years of their life worried that they don't have somewhere to go. Housing is the brick and mortar of our city. We wouldn't be here if people didn't have a place to live. So I just want to say that tonight's a historic win for Kingston renters that are fortunate enough to receive the New York State protections under the provisions of the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. But far too many renters in Kingston are still left without protections. And I urge my colleagues on the council to enact further legislation to help ensure that all renters are living in safe, affordable rentals. All tenants should have protections where their landlords are held accountable for repairs and rents are affordable to prevent further displacement for our community. I am a proud yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Michael Oliveri, and then, Alderwoman Barbara Hill, and then Alderman Michael Oliveri. You need to talk into your mic.
This.
There you
Hi,
go.
Barbara Hill, Alderman Ward 1. Madam President, Council, everyone present. This is a pretty emotional piece of legislation we're putting forward. I just feel like it's been a heartbreaking situation to receive so many calls from people in the developments in my ward, Stony Run, et cetera, and to hear the rent increases and providing emotional support. But it's also good to have, we really need these pieces of legislation. This is only one piece of a spectrum of housing components that we should have as part of a greater plan for the city, and I hope in our county. So I love the discourse between those of us in the council, hearing everybody's comments last night in an ongoing manner. So this is just, people are so grateful in my ward. I'm finding that we are doing this evening, so I will be a yes.
Thank you. Alderman Michael Oliveri.
Thank you, Madam President. The old saying goes, a few bad apples ruin it for the bunch. The passing of the ETPA will do just that. It will ruin the good landlords by bunching them in with the slumlords. Not everyone is a corporate conglomerate buying up properties. Most of the landlords that own the smaller properties are locals. They inherited the property. Maybe they decided to invest in real estate. Maybe they just wanted a way to make passive income. None of that is illegal. What should be illegal is punishing the many for the actions of the few. We heard from one landlord who showed her P&L statement. That statement showed us in 2021 she operated at a loss, and in 2022 a projected profit of just $4,500. That's assuming every tenant will pay rent, that nothing major requires fixing, or Central Hudson doesn't raise prices again. This resolution will only cover a small percentage of the apartments in Kingston. Multiple studies have shown that rents will rise faster for the other larger percentage as a result. The government gave tenants the green light to not pay the rent. Landlords and homeowners, on the other hand, were reminded their bills and taxes are due on their normal dates. On Tuesday, we heard testimonies from both sides. The vast majority of those demanding we pass this are the same people who caused this. Everyone mentioned 2020. The housing shortage started in 2020. Do you know what happened in 2020? Kingston became Brooklyn North. A huge influx of people used to paying $3,000 to $4,000 a month for rent and possibly more decided to move up here and price out the locals for apartments and home ownership. There is a housing crisis. There are things we can do that have a huge positive impact on all. We can sell the zombie properties we are sitting on, wasting taxpayer dollars for maintenance and upkeep. We need to supply the building department with the resources they need to keep on top and find the slumlords. We need to expedite the eviction process so landlords can get rid of tenants that are refusing to pay. We need to go after the Airbnb people, tighten up regulations and increase the taxes on them. The New York Office of Rent Administration states municipalities can limit the number of units this act will apply to. After this resolution is assumingly passed, I will ask to have an amendment to increase the number of units this applies to go after the larger offenders and allow the little guys a reprieve. I have spoken to constituents throughout my ward. They are against this and so am I. Finally, think about this. Everyone would love to drive a Mercedes, but I can only afford a Honda. Do I complain to Mercedes about that? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Alderman Steve Shabbat.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a couple thoughts. I think we're all in agreement. This is hardly a perfect legislation. Lot of pros, a lot of cons, a lot of differences of opinion on this. But, you know, as I sit and listen to folks, and I've heard, and I'm sure everybody on the council gets calls that they have people who are fearful, you know, that someone is going to purchase their property and they're not going to be, I hear it, you know, there's been numerous times, you know, during my tenure that I've gotten these calls and people are fearful. Yes, it might not even happen. They might be fearful of something that may not come to pass. But the first call is us, you know, to see if there's something that can be done to put some safeguards in place. And as we also, this is not perfect, you know, nor do I think, as Rennie said, you know, this is reasonable. I don't think it's a drastic document. Of course, that's a matter of opinion, which side you're on, you know, but I guess where I'm going with this is I hear people being uncomfortable in our community. And I have voted over the years, you know, pretty much that really sways me when I hear a lot of fearful people, and maybe they're fearful of nothing, you know, but they're fearful nonetheless. And I do hear these complaints, you know, and you know, these are some safeguards that we can put in place. Again, not perfect. And I'm sure we'll, you know, as Michael says, we'll be looking at some different ways to tweak this, you know, as time goes on. But anyway, all that being said, I will be voting yes.
Alderwoman Naima Mohammed.
Good evening. I just wanted to say that, or to highlight the word crisis. And everyone has a smartphone, or a lot of people have access to a smartphone. They can Google that, so I won't give the definition. However, what I will say is if we are all in agreement that we are in a housing crisis, we must act. We cannot just wait, and we cannot go and take long periods of time while people are suffering, trying to secure housing, especially, you know, being a young person on the council. I have friends and family members that are in deep contemplation of leaving Kingston because of this issue. And a lot of them have left as well. College students cannot stay here. And the list goes on. So I just want to highlight young people, young adults, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, and 34, right? And the list goes on. We saw all ages testify the other day. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And again, we should continue to act like we are in a crisis with sense and all of the things, but we are in a crisis, and I am honored to be for this legislation. Thank you.
Anyone else on the question? Hearing no one else, I will call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes 7-1. That is all we have on our agenda for the evening. Does anybody have anything else? Otherwise, I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Alderman Michael Oliveri, second by Barbara Hill. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Here, tonight's meeting is adjourned at 7:07 until the next regularly scheduled meeting on Tuesday, August 2nd at 7:30 PM. Thank you very much.